All right, shifting gears this morning at 8:33. Yeah, late last week, Governor Lincoln Chafee unveiled a new package of legislation. It was aimed at helping cash-strapped cities and towns in Rhode Island avoid bankruptcy. And WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi joining us now with an in-depth look at this proposal. So you were at the press event last week, Ted. You heard the specifics of the plan. Before we get to that, tell us about where we are at as far as the communities that are potentially in trouble here. We already know Central Falls is in trouble. East Providence is on the list. Where else? Sure,
Danielle. Actually, Governor Chafee put it, he said the two P's and the two W's. You have Pawtucket and Providence. Pawtucket's facing a deficit, Providence too, and it's a big deficit. You also have Woonsocket and West Warwick. All of those cities and towns are in trouble. And now what they're looking at with this is how to prevent more towns from getting into that category where they're not quite as bad as Central Falls, obviously, which is bankrupt, or East Providence, which the state has already gotten involved, but to prevent more towns from getting in that situation and keep those from getting worse.
All right, so this is obviously a monumentally huge problem here in Rhode Island. I mean, this is not something that's going to get fixed overnight. So what did you think were maybe some of the bullet points of the plan that struck you as just the meat of what he's proposing here?
It's pretty sweeping, Danielle, and that signals we're going to have a big fight at the General Assembly about this. They called it the Municipal Tools Plan. I should say Governor Chafee is surrounded by mayors and town managers when he introduced this. You can see it there. There are changes to pensions and health benefits, which is always a thorny topic in Rhode Island, collective bargaining agreements between police and fire unions and teachers in their cities and towns. Some of those could be expired, and others provisions of it wouldn't have to continue. There'd also be much more oversight, because what we saw in Woonsocket is the school department just kept spending money way past their budget, and no one knew until it was way too late. And so they want to make sure they're tracking that all through and not get into that situation again. All right, so when you hear and you speak to people behind the scenes, what are the chances of this legitimately passing, muster at the state level here? I'd say there's a lot of skepticism. I mean, the General Assembly, the Senate especially, is very close to the police and fire unions in particular. They have a powerful voice on Smith Hill, and every one of these, I counted 17 major planks in this plan. Every one of these would be a big fight. So to do it all at once. Now the counterbalance to that is this isn't a fake crisis. I mean, we have these cities and towns going left and right, falling on top of themselves, and we have the whole country is looking. The Wall Street Journal last week, New York Times is constantly mentioning us now. Rhode Island doesn't want to continue to get this reputation as a place that can't keep its cities and towns on track. So I think that could counterbalance it. And then politically, the mayors are often more popular than the lawmakers. So if they put pressure on them, that could change the equation. I mean, sometimes critics will say, we've seen a lot of talk and not a lot of action. Obviously, this is the time for action. When do you think we're going to start to see maybe some of the pieces of the puzzle start to form here? Well, unfortunately, what we've seen in recent years is that what happens is we have a calamity and then there's action. Central Falls files for receivership on its own, then the state jumps in, passes a new law in about 3 weeks, even though there were signals that could be coming. Providence is saying, look, we're going to run out of cash and go into bankruptcy. Now they're thinking about putting some things in place. I mean, it'd be part of the idea here is to put things in place so you don't always have to get to that terrible point before you start to make changes. So we'll see if this package is what the General Assembly wants to do, if they want to do anything, but I bet something will come out, but I don't know if it'll look like this. Okay, so maybe a smaller, more watered down version of this, perhaps? Or? I think that's quite possible. I think they won't want to say they didn't do anything. Last week we got a press release that tanning had been banned for young people. I mean, the General Assembly doesn't want to look like they have their head in the sand, but they might not want to do all this. All right, certainly a lot to digest. And if you want to learn more about the plan, and thank you, Ted, for joining us, we have the details of the proposed legislation on our website at foxprovidence.com.